OK and the podcast serves as a vessel to bridge the gap between human isolation and connection. We are all going through something. However, what happens when we start sharing our stories? We will be able to connect, heal, and grow. Come with me and my guests on a journey that will uncover their OK and moment. I'm your host, Just Jess. Let's get started. Good morning, good evening, wherever you're listening to this podcast. I'm your host, Just Jess. Welcome to OK and the podcast, where we are bridging the gap between human isolation and connection. And it's been a week. I'm so looking forward to next week being that it is, a day that we get to celebrate, but also time to rest, time to shop. Just time to reset going into the remaining of the fourth quarter. But I wanted to come to y'all and just talk about what I'm grateful for. And, if you've listened to this podcast for the past, 3 years, there's been episodes that I've talked about my relationships regarding my parents. I've had my mom on the show. And, I've talked about my relationship with my biological dad, rest in peace, uh, the dad that raised me, and then how that correlates into my my world of dating, if you will. But as I reflect and really, put y'all, I guess, get you up to speed on my life and what's going on, I was able to consider this an OK and moment, but really had to navigate the waters of what do I do next? And I'll take you back. Being a millennial, we love boy bands. And majority of the boy bands before B2K was a thing were white boy bands. And it was NSYNC, 98 Degrees, LFO, Backstreet Boys, the whole bit. And from the age of, I want to say, 10 to 15, that was all of the posters in my room. I mean, posters covered from ceiling to ceiling, from J16 magazine, whatever magazine that I could get at the time. I would rip those posters from the magazines and plaster from AJ to Justin Timberlake. Everybody was on my walls. And Mario was there too. And my dad would say to me, why are you in love with these boy bands? You should be listening to Blackstreet or 112. Now, mind you, think of the age gap and the difference. Okay. Peaches and Cream came out when I was in the 8th grade. I didn't know what they were talking about. I just liked the song. All right. So fast forward, my sister loves K-pop. She knows every single group. She knows every single person in each group, and her favorite group of all time is BTS. And my sister reached out to me and was extremely upset because my dad was saying things in regards to, Korean men not liking Black women and why do you root for them, and just the most disrespectful things that you can say to a teenager, a young adult, when they are proud and into something. So she reaches out to me and says, Jesse, I'm tired of this. Daddy's saying X, Y, and Z about BTS. I can't stand him. I can't stand. Why does he talk about BTS this way? They just make great music. I don't understand. And I'm looking at my text messages, and at the time we had a group family chat. And my brother, shout out to Steven, he's at Fresno State, doing his thing with robotics and all of that. And he sends a text in the family group chat like, hey, everyone's all right. Mind you, I'm having this side conversation with Vivica. And I put in the text message, I said, no, everything's not okay. Dad, if you keep coming after Vivica, you're going to have to deal with me. It doesn't make sense that you can't let her just be free. And after that, he proceeds to cuss me out in our group family chat. He says he never wants to see me again. I am not welcome at his house. Don't bring Martin, like, and using explicit, like to the point where I've never been cussed out that way ever in my life before. So after the 7-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 25-year-old, the 30-year-old, all of those emotions came out and I just blacked out. I said what I said via text. I talked about him having a fixed mindset. I talked about him not letting his children breathe, being a control freak, all of the things that I've been bottling up to say. I said it. And I ended with, you don't have to ever see me again. It's totally fine. We don't have to communicate. I pray that you get some professional help. And I kept it pushing. And that's been almost a year and a half. And even though the words are super, super harsh, I was proud of me because yes, I'm protecting my sister, but at the same time, I had those same feelings growing up. And I don't know what it is about relationships between daughters and dads. I've seen it done correctly in a few settings, but in my experience, I have this very faint memory of us being very close when I was growing up, getting into basketball, teaching me how to drive, teaching me just all the different things, helping me fill out the application for different jobs. Like I have, you know, great memories. And then when adulthood starts to happen, they start to get, they're not great memories. They're almost nightmares. And all of this, it's been a year and a half and we're coming into the holidays. And last year I wasn't really impacted, if you will, because I didn't really care. I was like, okay, it's the holidays, whatnot. But going into now, I do miss us getting together as a family for, Thanksgiving and playing Uno and watching the Cowboys or even going into Christmas. But I'm here to tell you that when it comes to your parents, regardless of your traditions, if they disrespect you, whether you are a young adult, preteen, grown, whatever the case may be, and they do not apologize, it is your right to cut off that relationship. It is your right to say enough is enough. It is your right to say, I am not going to tolerate this any longer. And it doesn't matter what age you are allowed, you have permission to do that. And it took me a while because at some point in my life, yes, I do want to get married. Yes. Do we want to have kids? That's a whole nother episode. We'll get to that. But I think about who's going to walk me down the aisle? Who's going to walk me down the aisle? And do I rush and like have a relationship because I want this person to walk me down the aisle? Or do I pause and sit back and be like, who are those male figures in my life that can walk me down the aisle? And that set with me for quite some time in this past year and a half, because I'm like, do I pick up the phone and call so we can have an adult to adult conversation? Or do I just let it be? Oh, Jessica, you had it blocked. Okay, you blocked your dad. Oh, well. But all that to say, I had to create that separation because I can't allow myself to keep getting disappointed from a relationship with a parent. And I know there are people out there right now that have went through the ebbs and flows of having, difficulties with their parents, especially if your parents are young. And if you grew up with your parents, there are there are so many different attitudes and avenues that you go through to understand this person in front of you. Yes, they raised you, and yes, they, gave birth to you or maybe adopted you, whatever the case may be, but they're still human, they're still people, and they still need to be held accountable. There are times where I go back and I think about, man, if I had the language to have a relationship with my biological father, would he still be here? Would he still be here? And would we be able to have a relationship to where I could go to him and talk to him about the craziness that I go through, or, hey, can we just go to the Laker game, or whatever. But I didn't have the language and I didn't have the opportunity to gain perspective from that absence of a relationship. And I have a letter from my biological dad, and he's writing from being incarcerated. And he's talking about, don't do drugs, Jesse, you have a bright future, just all the things that you would love to hear. And I keep that letter close to me. um and sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I need to write a letter to my dad that raised me. Maybe I need to, tell him how I feel. And again, this is not an episode to feel sorry for me. This is not an episode to like, oh, what was me? It's really just, if you are dealing with your parents, especially as they get older, it is okay to have those boundaries. There are times where I do not see eye to eye with a lot of things my family members do. And I've always been quiet about it. I've always been, oh, well, let me make sure that they're happy, make sure that they, they see that I get good grades, or, I'm doing well in this category, in that category. And so if they focus more on me, I don't have to focus on them and their shortcomings. And enough is enough. This episode, play it before you go interact with your family. If you haven't interacted with them in a very long time, make sure that you have the stamina, the mental capacity to handle questions that they might ask you, especially if you are a certain age. Make sure, hey, how will I handle this? How, what's my exit strategy if I need to leave early? Or how am I going to heal relationships going forward if that's something that you choose to do? Again, it is totally up to you. I hope that, hmm, I hope that I'm able to have a relationship with him later on down the line, but at the same time, I don't know if it's possible. There are so many things that a person can say to you where you have a protective shield, and it bounces off, and then there's some things that just penetrate. And I don't know why it was BTS. I have no idea, but it was, actually I do know, it was just triggering. It was triggering knowing that me as a child liking different boy bands that were not of my ethnicity was a crime almost in my household. And that shit sucks. uh the fact that we grew up a little bit differently, where yeah, we had the music when it came to Black culture, but I grew up riding dirt bikes and going to Chaparral and going to Adelanto Raceway, and just different raceways when it came to motorcycles and four wheelers. I mean, and there wasn't a lot of chocolate drops what we were where we were at. A few far in between. So, to broaden your horizon and know different things outside of your culture is truly, is it's a beautiful thing. So I think when it comes down to this path in my life, maybe I should have paused and reflect. Maybe I should have picked up the phone and called and had a conversation with him about it. Maybe I should have just drove to the house and like, what's going on? But at that time, it was rage, it was anger, it was frustration. Um, and after the text messages and after I said goodbye in the family group chat, it was so funny. My brothers created a basically new group chat, and my baby brother texted me and was like, I love you, sister. You're always my sister. All the things. Um, my brother Steven called and was like, are you okay, sis? Like, talk to me. What's going on? My sister was like, thank you so much for sticking up for me. My mom said, you got a little bit of Shirley Smith in you. And that's her mom, little gangster, but I did tell all of them, just because I have my experience, yes, speak up, but speak up in a manner where it's not disrespectful. I'm out the house. Okay. I've been out the house since I was 16 years old, 17 years old. So I, I'm not getting kicked out. So just make sure, you have you have that particular uh demeanor, if you will, if you're going to have an adult conversation with him. So uh, there's just there's so much. I think the oh, okay, there's that's cool because we're in the streets of LA. Oh yeah. Just let that go by. Hurry up, fire truck. And there's a gamut of things, but that part, and then segueing into your parents and your relationships with your siblings. There are moments where my brother and I grew up in the same household, two parent household, and there were comparisons between us, whether it was school or sports, like, oh, you need to be like Jesse when it comes to school, or you need to be like Steven when it comes to sports. And it took us years to actually see us as brother and sister and not competition. My brother and I, we've just now, maybe during the pandemic and right before, we've okay, what in the world is happening outside? So we just started, texting, talking, understanding, our lives. And it's a beautiful feeling, but I do think there was a wedge there for so many years. And I'm glad that we were able to rebuild that relationship. With my other siblings, my middle sister, Layla, has autism and she got diagnosed when she was 4. And I saw the transition of how my dad would treat Layla compared to my other siblings. Um, there are times where you don't understand where your parents, there are so many different services for different ability folks to come into your home and help and support. And my mom, honoring my dad because he's provider of the household and stuff, he didn't want people in the house. And knowing that and knowing him not going to IEP meetings or him not going to different counseling services for my sister, it really struck a chord because how do you call yourself a provider or the head of this household when you're not supporting all of your children because one is different? So I think it's been a buildup from from for a very, very long time. And I found myself just saying everything that I have been wanting to say for so, so long. And my sister called me and said, Jesse, daddy's crying. I can't believe this. I've never seen him cry before. Uh, he thinks that, you're trying to pin him against everybody. I'm like, no, I'm not. And that's sad that he is crying. But unfortunately, I've been having feelings for almost 20, 25 some odd years. So it is what it is. So again, short episode, but just being grateful of the fact that I was able to speak up for myself. And that's something that I'm continuing to work on. And I love that we're going into the holidays because even though I do miss those traditions, it gives me the opportunity to create new traditions with my new family. So I love that. I love y'all. I will be off next week, Thanksgiving, couple days to myself. But then we're coming in hot and heavy with new episodes. So be blessed, stay prayed up, and make sure that you create boundaries for yourself. Until then, y'all, take care. Peace.